What happens when African nations become tired of Western control over them? The West, particularly the US, assumed that African nations would continue to be exploited without protest. However, Niger has demonstrated that this is not the case. Niger's military government has announced the termination of its military agreement with the US. This decision was made because the agreement was deemed unfair and did not benefit Niger in any way. Instead, it only served to allow the US to exploit Niger.
Because our economic relations with Africa are simply a continuation of European colonialism, perpetuating exploitation by other means.
The agreement, signed in 2012, prompts the question, why did Niger make this decision now, after so many years? Has something recently occurred to motivate Niger? Let's find out. Niger's military government announces the termination of its military agreement with the US. But why did Niger's military government decide to terminate the military agreement with the US?
With military bases, France, the US, China, Germany, Japan, Italy, Saudi Arabia all have a presence in the tiny area of Djibouti alone.
Niger's military government decided to terminate the military agreement with the US primarily due to injustices and violations of Niger's sovereignty inherent in the agreement. Colonel Major Amadou Abdramane, the Nigerian military spokesman, asserted that the agreement, signed in 2012, was imposed on Niger and ran counter to the country's constitutional and democratic principles. Abdramane specifically highlighted the agreement as profoundly unfair and stated that it did not align with the aspirations and interests of the Nigerian people. These grievances suggest a fundamental dissatisfaction with the terms and implications of the agreement, prompting the military government to take decisive action to terminate it. Abdramane's remarks indicate that the decision was driven by a desire to assert Niger's autonomy and sovereignty in matters of military cooperation and foreign intervention. By denouncing the agreement, Niger's military government aimed to reclaim control over its territory and military affairs, signaling a shift away from undue external influence. This decision reflects a broader sentiment within Niger regarding the need to assert national sovereignty and resist external imposition, particularly in matters as sensitive as military cooperation with foreign powers. Furthermore, the timing of the termination, following the ascent of a military junta to power in July 2023 and the subsequent withdrawal of US troops from Niger, suggests that evolving domestic and regional dynamics may also influence the decision. The junta's rise to power and the subsequent re-evaluation of international alliances likely contributed to reassessing the utility and desirability of the military agreement with the US. But what specific grudges does Colonel Major Amadou Abdramane mention regarding the agreement? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Colonel Major Amadou Abdramane, the Nigerian military spokesman, cited several specific grievances regarding the military agreement with the US. Abdramane asserted that the agreement was imposed on Niger, suggesting that the terms were not negotiated on equal footing or with full consent from the Nigerian government. This implies a sense of coercion or lack of agency in determining the terms of the agreement. Abdramane contended that the agreement violated Niger's constitutional and democratic rules. This suggests that the terms of the agreement may have contradicted established legal frameworks or democratic norms within Niger, raising concerns about its legitimacy and legality. Abdramane characterized the agreement as profoundly unfair in its substance. This indicates that the terms of the agreement were perceived as unjust or inequitable, potentially favoring one party over the other in a manner deemed unacceptable by Nigerian authorities. Abdramane stated that the agreement did not meet the aspirations and interests of the Nigerian people. This suggests that the agreement failed to align with the broader strategic objectives or national interests of Niger, potentially undermining its effectiveness or legitimacy in the eyes of the public. But why all of a sudden this decision is taken? Does something influence it? How did the relationship between Niger and the US evolve before the termination of the agreement? Before the termination of the military agreement, the relationship between Niger and the US underwent several phases of evolution. Historically, Niger and the US maintained a cooperative relationship, particularly in the realm of security and counterterrorism. The U.S. viewed Niger as a key regional partner in efforts to combat extremist groups operating in the Sahel region, such as Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda affiliates. In 2012, Niger and the U.S. signed a military agreement that allowed U.S. military personnel and civilian employees of the Department of Defense to operate in Niger. This agreement formalized and expanded the cooperation between the two countries in areas such as training, intelligence sharing, and counterterrorism operations. Following the signing of the agreement, the U.S. deployed a significant number of troops to Niger, with approximately 100 troops stationed in the country. These troops were crucial in supporting Nigerian security forces and conducting counterterrorism operations in the region. The relationship between Niger and the U.S. was influenced by broader shifts in regional dynamics, including the escalation of extremist violence in the Sahel and the emergence of new security threats. This period saw increased U.S. engagement in the region, including expanding military operations and assistance programs. The relationship between Niger and the U.S. underwent a significant shift following the rise of a military junta to power in July 2023. The junta's seizure of power was formally designated as a coup by the U.S., leading to a reassessment of the bilateral relationship and a gradual withdrawal of U.S. troops from Niger. The designation of the junta's rise to power as a coup by the U.S. marked a turning point in bilateral relations, contributing to a deterioration of relations between Niger and the U.S. This deterioration was further exacerbated by the termination of the military agreement and subsequent criticisms of U.S. delegation visits by Nigerian officials. What events occurred after the military junta claimed power in Niger in July 2023? The United States formally designated the military junta's rise to power as a coup. This designation had important implications for the bilateral relationship between Niger and the U.S., as it triggered a reassessment of diplomatic and military ties. The designation of the junta's rise to power as a coup contributed to a deterioration of relations between Niger and the U.S. This deterioration was fueled by disagreements over the legitimacy of the junta's government and divergent views on how to address the political crisis in Niger. In response to the political instability and the U.S. designation of the junta's rise as a coup, the U.S. began a gradual withdrawal of its troops from Niger. This withdrawal signaled a shift in U.S. policy towards Niger and reflected concerns about the political situation in the country. The rise of the military junta prompted Nigerian authorities to re-evaluate their international alliances and partnerships. This re-evaluation included a reassessment of the utility and desirability of the military agreement with the U.S., leading to the decision to terminate the agreement. The political instability resulting from the junta's rise to power exacerbated regional insecurity in the Sahel region. The absence of a stable government in Niger created opportunities for extremist groups to exploit power vacuums and escalate violence, posing significant challenges to regional stability and security. Now, let's talk about some recent events. A decision was made between Niger and U.S. delegations. What were the outcomes of the discussions between Niger and the senior U.S. delegation? The outcomes of the discussions between Niger and the senior U.S. delegation were characterized by tensions and dissatisfaction, as indicated by Colonel Major Amadou Abdramane, the Nigerian military spokesman. Despite the visit of the U.S. delegation, which aimed to engage in discussions regarding military transition in Niger and military cooperation between the two countries, Abdramane highlighted several issues that soured the interactions. Abdramane criticized the U.S. delegation for failing to adhere to diplomatic practices. Specifically, he mentioned that the delegation did not provide essential information, such as the date of arrival, the composition of the delegation, and the purpose of the visit. This breach of diplomatic protocol likely contributed to a sense of frustration and disrespect from Nigerian officials. Abdramane expressed regret over the delegation's desire to deny the Nigerian people the right to choose their partners and types of partnerships that could assist in fighting against terrorists. This statement suggests that Nigerian officials felt that the U.S. delegation's actions undermined Niger's autonomy and sovereignty in determining its foreign partnerships and military cooperation agreements. Abdramane strongly denounced the U.S. delegation's condescending attitude. This characterization indicates that Nigerian officials felt demeaned or belittled by the U.S. delegation's demeanor or behavior during the discussions. Such perceptions likely strained the atmosphere of the meetings and hindered constructive dialogue between the two parties. But in what ways did the U.S. delegation fail to adhere to diplomatic protocols during their visit to Niger? The U.S. delegation failed to adhere to diplomatic protocols during their visit to Niger in several ways, as highlighted by Colonel Major Amadou Abdramani, the Nigerian military spokesman. The U.S. delegation did not provide essential information regarding their visit, such as the date of arrival, the composition of the delegation, and the purpose of the visit. This lack of communication violated standard diplomatic practices, which typically involve prior notification and transparency about the objectives and details of official visits. Diplomatic protocol often entails coordination between visiting delegations and host countries to ensure that meetings and interactions proceed smoothly and effectively. However, the U.S. delegation's failure to provide essential information about their visit hindered the Nigerian government's ability to coordinate logistics and make necessary arrangements. Abdraman's remarks suggest that the U.S. delegation's actions may have been perceived as a disregard for Niger's sovereignty and autonomy. By failing to adhere to diplomatic protocols and provide essential information, the delegation has conveyed a lack of respect for Niger's right to be informed and involved in diplomatic interactions occurring on its territory. Abdramani expressed regret over what he perceived as the delegation's attempt to deny the Nigerian people the right to choose their partners and types of partnerships in combating terrorism. This suggests that the U.S. delegation's actions were seen as infringing upon Niger's sovereignty and interfering with its ability to make independent decisions about its international relationships and security cooperation agreements. Now the question comes: what implications does Niger's decision to terminate the agreement hold for regional security dynamics? Niger's decision to terminate the agreement with the U.S. holds several broader implications for regional security dynamics in the Sahel region. According to the U.S., the termination of the agreement could disrupt ongoing counterterrorism efforts in the Sahel region. Niger has been a key partner for the U.S. in combating extremist groups such as Boko Haram and various al-Qaeda affiliates. With the withdrawal of U.S. military personnel and potential disruption in intelligence sharing and joint operations, efforts may weaken to counter these threats. Niger's decision signals a potential shift in its security alliances and partnerships. As a landlocked country in a volatile region, Niger relies on international support to address security challenges. The termination of the agreement with the U.S. may prompt Niger to seek alternative partnerships with other countries or regional organizations, potentially reshaping the security landscape in the Sahel. The termination of the agreement could have ripple effects on regional stability in the Sahel. The presence of U.S. troops in Niger not only contributed to counterterrorism efforts within Niger, but also had broader implications for regional stability by providing a deterrent against extremist groups operating across borders. The withdrawal of U.S. troops and potential disruption in security cooperation could create vulnerabilities that could be exploited by extremist groups, leading to increased insecurity in the region. In the absence of U.S. military presence and cooperation, there may be a greater reliance on regional security forces, including Nigerian armed forces and those of neighboring countries. This could increase militarization in the region as countries bolster their military capabilities to address security threats independently. Terminating the agreement could create opportunities for other international actors to fill the void left by the withdrawal of U.S. military personnel. Countries such as France, which maintains a significant military presence in the Sahel as part of Operation Barkhane, may seek to deepen their engagement with Niger and other countries in the region. Additionally, regional organizations such as the African Union and the Economic Community of West African States (ECOWAS) might play a more prominent role in supporting security initiatives in the Sahel. And how does this decision reflect Niger's stance on sovereignty and foreign military presence? Niger's decision to terminate the agreement with the U.S. reflects a strong stance on sovereignty and its desire to assert control over its military affairs and territory. By denouncing the agreement as profoundly unfair and in violation of Niger's constitutional and democratic principles, Niger is asserting its sovereignty and rejecting external imposition. The decision suggests that Niger is unwilling to tolerate arrangements that it views as infringing upon its autonomy and sovereignty. The assertion that the agreement does not meet the aspirations and interests of the Nigerian people underscores Niger's commitment to defending its national interests. By prioritizing the interests of its citizens, Niger is signaling a departure from arrangements serving external interests at the expense of domestic priorities. Niger's criticism of the U.S. delegation's failure to adhere to diplomatic protocols reflects a willingness to assert itself in diplomatic relations and demand respect for its sovereignty. By expressing regret over the delegation's attempts to deny the Nigerian people the right to choose their partners, Niger is asserting its agency in determining its foreign partnerships and security cooperation agreements. The decision to terminate the agreement suggests that Niger is asserting its autonomy in decision-making regarding foreign military presence on its territory. By taking unilateral action to terminate the agreement, Niger is asserting its right to determine the terms and conditions of military cooperation and partnership agreements with foreign countries. How will the termination of the agreement impact the presence of U.S. military personnel in Niger? The termination of the agreement may lead to the immediate withdrawal of U.S. military personnel stationed in Niger. With the agreement no longer in effect, there may be legal and logistical impediments to maintaining U.S. military presence in Niger, prompting a swift withdrawal of troops and personnel. The termination of the agreement could result in a reduction or cessation of military cooperation between Niger and the U.S. Without the legal framework provided by the agreement, the basis for joint training exercises, intelligence sharing initiatives, and other cooperative activities may no longer exist, leading to a decline in military cooperation between the two countries. The presence of U.S. military personnel in Niger has been instrumental in supporting counterterrorism operations in the region. The termination of the agreement could disrupt ongoing efforts to combat extremist groups such as Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda affiliates, potentially weakening Niger's ability to address security threats within its borders. But it also allowed exploitation, which will soon stop. The withdrawal of U.S. military personnel from Niger could strain regional security dynamics in the Sahel region. The presence of U.S. troops has served as a deterrent against extremist groups operating in the region, and their withdrawal may create vulnerabilities that could be exploited by these groups, leading to increased insecurity and instability. While the termination of the agreement may result in the withdrawal of U.S. military personnel from Niger, it also opens the door for alternative arrangements and partnerships. Other countries or international organizations may seek to fill the void left by the departure of U.S. troops, potentially leading to the establishment of new security cooperation agreements or initiatives in the region. How beneficial is this decision for Niger's sovereignty? By terminating the military agreement, Niger asserts greater autonomy over its military affairs and territorial sovereignty. This decision allows Niger to exercise control over its security policies and determine the terms of its military cooperation agreements without external imposition. Niger's decision aligns with its constitutional and democratic principles, as highlighted by Colonel Major Amadou Abdrahman. It signifies a commitment to upholding the rule of law and ensuring that foreign agreements adhere to the country's legal framework and democratic norms. The termination of the agreement reflects Niger's commitment to prioritizing its national interests and the well-being of its citizens. By denouncing unfair terms and agreements that do not serve its interests, Niger asserts itself as a sovereign nation, capable of making decisions in its best interest. With the termination of the agreement, Niger gains flexibility in shaping its foreign relations and security partnerships. It opens the door for exploring alternative arrangements with other countries or regional organizations that may better align with Niger's strategic priorities and objectives. Beyond the practical implications, the decision to terminate the agreement sends a strong symbolic message about Niger's commitment to sovereignty and independence. It highlights Niger's willingness to challenge external influence and assert itself as a sovereign nation capable of making decisions that serve its national interests. So, overall, is it a good decision? Determining whether Niger's decision to terminate the military agreement with the U.S. is a good decision depends on various factors and perspectives. From the perspective of sovereignty and autonomy, the decision aligns with Niger's desire to assert control over its military affairs and uphold its constitutional principles. It allows Niger to make independent decisions regarding its security policies and foreign relations, which could be seen as a positive development in terms of national self-determination. Internally, some segments of the Nigerian population may perceive the decision as demonstrating the government's commitment to protecting national interests and sovereignty. Does the U.S. exploiting of Niger end here? Diplomatic relations between Niger and the U.S. are likely to persist, despite the termination of the military agreement. Both countries have interests beyond military cooperation, including economic development, trade, and political stability. Diplomatic channels may remain open for communication and collaboration on various issues of mutual concern. The U.S. may continue to engage with Niger through economic assistance, development projects, and trade relations. Economic cooperation is essential to bilateral relations and may provide continued engagement and partnership opportunities between the two countries. But definitely, now the U.S. can't easily exploit Niger as it used to. Do you think escaping the West's influence is necessary for African nations to become independent? Will the exploitation end means a new dawn for Africa? Let us know in the comment section. Do you support Niger's decision? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.